Welcome everybody who's just joining. We're just going to give it another minute or two just to get a few more people joining us, and then we'll get cracking. Okay, I think it's about time we get started. Hi everyone, and welcome to our Furlough panel discussion. I'm Amy Davis, Content Marketing Manager at Reed Specialist Recruitment. Joining me today are Karen Jackson, HR Director for Reed Specialist Recruitment. Good afternoon, Karen. Thank you for joining.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. We've got Danny Cripps, Head of HR for Homes Care Group. Good afternoon, Danny. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi guys, thanks for having me.
And Claire Wojciak, who is Head of HR for UK, France and Belgium for the MacArthur Glen Group. Thanks for joining us, Claire. How are you?
I'm really well. Hi, everyone.
Okay, so the main aim of this event is just to have a bit of a discussion, to provide you, you guys who are tuning in, with some best practice advice and hints and tips on how you can introduce your workforce back into the workplace following furlough. At the end of our panel discussion, I'll be putting questions to the guys on the panel for about 30 minutes. And we will have 15 minutes for them to answer any questions you'd like to put to them. So as we go along, in the top right-hand corner, whatever way that is, of the screen, you'll find the Q&A section. If you just pop any questions you can think of that come into your head as we're going along in there, we'll try to address as many of those at the end. And also, this webinar is being recorded, so if you wish to look back or send it on to other people to have a watch of, then please do feel free. We'll send you that afterwards. So let's get cracking. Firstly, all of you, can you just please tell us a little bit about yourself, introduce yourselves, and give us a brief overview of your experience with the government furlough scheme? Claire, if you want to go first, that'd be great.
Yeah, hi everyone. So a little bit of background about me. So as apologies, I saw that I hadn't done my profile for the invite. So I've been with MacArthur Glen now since November 2017. And for those who don't know who MacArthur Glen are, designer outlets. So we own, develop and manage 25 outlets across 10 countries. We partner with some of the world's best known brands, so things like Burberry, Ralph Lauren. It all sounds very glamorous. And our centres are major employers in the communities in which we operate. So one of the first things I would say is, I know today we're going to focus on the UK, but from a MacArthur Glen point of view, our experience with furlough schemes commenced before March 23rd. So we were very much in a position of watching the rest of Europe go through lockdown processes. And then, of course, we entered at we commenced in the 23rd of March. And at that point, the 6 centres in the UK were closed. So middle of April is when we really we engaged with the furlough scheme, and that was the point at which we consulted with the colleagues. So yeah, that's our kind of beginning of the journey with the government scheme in the UK.
Fab, Claire, thank you. Danny, would you like to take to the floor?
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Danny, Head of HR for Homes Care Group. Homes Care Group is care home services. So we have services across England and Scotland, so only within the UK. I've actually only been with the business myself since the beginning of December 2019. So a bit of a challenging year, being thrown right into the deep end. So we only really started to use the furlough scheme kind of in about May. And that was purely because we had a lot of staff that were needing to be shielded at home. We are frontline workers, so our business has been very much kind of experiencing a lot of pressure, and we've had to actually recruit lots more staff during this period. So ours is kind of the flip side of utilising furlough. It was on a needs must basis, so we've only used it for approximately 50 people out of over 1,200 staff across England and Scotland. So yeah, ours is a bit of a flip side, and it was quite complicated at the start. We thought we was out of the water with having to deal with it, but certainly not as time went on.
I'm sure it will be going on for a while yet as well. Karen, your turn now, if that's okay.
Sure. Hi everybody, my name's Karen. I'm the HRD for Reed Specialist Recruitment. I've been in the role for just over 2 years, and I've seen a lot of transformational change in that period of time. I flew out to Tampa Bay at the end of February this year for a holiday and flew back in at the beginning of March, just when you couldn't find toilet roll for love nor money in any of the UK shops. And obviously that was the point in time when coronavirus really became the reality for a lot of us. We've seen a lot of our co-members be impacted through coronavirus, and particularly through a downturn in trading just prior to COVID-19. We utilised the scheme for about 600 of our co-members for varying periods of time, some for just 3 weeks, some are now up to their 22nd week of the scheme. And I think for me, it was the biggest challenge of wading through the treacle. The government guidance was and still remains quite limited, and sort of trying to set ourselves best up for success and demystify it for our co-members, and hopefully we can go through some of that in this session today.
Fabulous, thank you ladies. So to get started, what would you all say has been the biggest challenge when putting your staff members on furlough? Danny, if you could take that one first, that'd be great.
Yeah, of course. So I'd probably say the most challenging thing, thinking about my business specifically, is around the changing guidance, as Karen just mentioned. For us, we kind of, as I said before, didn't think furlough applied to us in any way, shape or form. So it was kind of a, yes, you know, we don't need to deal with this because it looks quite complicated. You know, we're all still at work. We obviously had a lot of people that had to go at home and shield. Furlough didn't apply to them to start with. So we were kind of very much at the point of putting proposals together to try and help people financially and try and look at the impact of those that had to be at home and couldn't work in our business. And then suddenly that flipped on its head and changed that we could actually place those people on furlough, so they did receive financial support. So I think the change in guidance and kind of genuinely having to read everything every day because things were changing every 24 hours, that was probably the most challenging thing for our business. And I think actually having about 50 people out of our business was a real struggle. We had more people out of some different care homes and different locations than others, and that was purely just down to health or age groups and things like that. But actually we needed all the staff we could get. We had a fair few amount of staff who also work alongside the NHS in hospitals and things. We've got lots of nurses, carers, and obviously during the pandemic and, you know, when coronavirus first became kind of a big thing in the UK, they were unable to work in dual locations. So if they were working for the NHS, they really couldn't be working for us in the care homes and risk bringing that back to our vulnerable residents. So we had quite a few staff, you know, we had to speak to them, discuss with them, talk about their options. So not only did we have kind of some people walking out the door going, I'll come back when the pandemic's over, I'm going to go and support the NHS. We also obviously had this group of 50 people that we did have to place on furlough leave and have out of the business, which left us fairly short-staffed, some homes worse off than others. So yeah, I think the challenge for us really was kind of just the rapid changes and really just trying to get it right and keep our staff safe, the people that were vulnerable, just trying to get them out of the business as quickly as possible and put things in place for them, knowing that they were going to become quite financially affected by it before furlough came in for them. So yeah, it was very interesting, I think, that first couple of months.
Hectic is
definitely
some way to describe it. Claire, what about you? What was your biggest challenge or biggest challenges?
I think so. Initially, when the centres closed, we had everybody working from home. So as I said before, we didn't, you know, enter into the UK furloughing scheme until would have been 15th of April that week. And I think the biggest challenge for everybody was uncertainty. So you've got the whole uncertainty of the virus and what was happening, and, you know, people have got children at home and all of that. but also having to have conversations with colleagues. And because of course we had to consult with them and to gain their agreement to going into the scheme, without any end date associated with it. So, you know, that I think was very difficult for us as a team, but obviously for the people that we were talking to. And you know what, I have to say, colleagues were fantastic. I mean, you know, we have a really high engagement level within MacArthur Glen. And that really showed itself because people really got what was happening. They understood we were trying to avail ourselves of the scheme so that we were future-proofing, you know, the business to that extent, and therefore, you know, future-proofing employment. I'd say the other thing that was you know, obviously the scheme, we were all waiting to see what it was going to be, and I think as Danny said, you know, things were changing. When you're part of a business that is present in so many other countries, you can see what their schemes are about. And actually, so my role is not only UK, but France and Belgium. You know, the French scheme was always about partial activity. So we always knew right from day one, we'd have the opportunity to bring people back on a part-time basis. And of course, we didn't have that for some time in the UK. So I think, again, the whole you were in or you were out in terms of how the UK scheme worked initially was, was a bit of a challenge.
Sounds it. Karen, what about you?
Well, for me, there's probably about 4 main challenges. So the first one for us was process. Yes, as Danny alluded to, furlough was a term which didn't really exist in my vocabulary prior to March. Therefore, when it was introduced, the first challenge was, how do we do this in a really simple way, which managers and our co-members can understand? The second one for us was actually systems. So setting up our payroll system to pay a payroll element that didn't exist was actually incredibly difficult. Getting it to calculate correctly, getting the assurance to make sure that these co-members are also being paid right was a big challenge. Our third challenge was actually around the time to manage the scheme. With 600 people on furlough, it actually became a full-time job for a while to manage that, but also then use that data to do financial predictions. And the last one, probably the most important one, is about engagement. So it's how do we keep those co-members who are on furlough engaged within our business, and how do we support those who also remain in the business? You know, somebody mentioned me once that putting somebody on furlough was like putting them in a deep freezer, and I absolutely categorically disagree with that. It is not like putting them in a deep freeze where everything goes on hold, you know, their motivation, their knowledge, the client relationships. It's not that at all. You know, we need to ensure that they're kept engaged with their line manager and they're kept engaged with us as a business. And that was our biggest challenge to unpick.
Crikey. So next question, when bringing staff back into business, do you feel they should be re-inducted into the company? And if so, how are your companies managing this? Karen, do you want to take that one first, as you went last time?
Sure. I mean, for us, definitely, we have had a substantial change in ways of working since a lot of our co-members went on furlough. We moved, I know some people aren't going to believe this, but we moved from Lotus Notes to M365, which is a huge change. And we need to know that our co-members returning from furlough knew their way around these systems, because for those that remained active throughout, they've kind of gone through a journey. And actually, for these returning co-members from furlough, we're dropping them literally in at the deep end. So in our tech network, for example, the managing director, Chris, he held welcome back sessions, virtual welcome back sessions, went through all of the changes and updates for those co-members across his 100-strong team. You know, what had happened, what were the trading challenges, and then he followed that with like a surgery style event where he made himself available, let's say between 10 and 11 o'clock, for anybody to connect in on a team call and ask him any question, whether that's to do with tech and the trading or the structure, or whether that's to do with digital workplace and M365. And those things worked really, really well. In addition, our L&D team did an amazing job of creating virtual classroom events. And this was for anybody in our network who'd been on furlough, and they were refreshers on how to do things and different things that had changed. So, for example, we're very used to working in a face-to-face client environment, and we've now had to move to a virtual client environment. And how would we do that, and what would that look like? And the last thing that the L&D team did, which was just simply brilliant, from the point of lockdown, they set themselves a task and a challenge to do daily virtual lunch and learns. These have been invaluable to our active co-members, but they actually had the foresight to record every lunch and learn happened. And therefore what that also enabled us to do is to give these signpost them to our active or our returning from furlough co-members to set them best up success, so they can see those lunch and learns as they happened. So without any shadow of a doubt, re-inducting people who have been on furlough is an absolute must.
Yeah, I agree. The lunch and learns are fantastic for those of us that have still been there. So yeah, no, there's been some great stuff happening at Reed. So Claire, what about you?
Yeah, I'd reiterate a lot of what Karen said there. I mean, re-inducting people is being very important to us, if not just to make sure that they feel safe, so that they understand, you know, from a health and safety point of view, what has changed, also what's changed within the business, because we are having to do things and approach things in a different way. We established a community hub, so we've had things on there for all colleagues to access. So whether you were in or whether you were out of the business, you could go on there. You know, we've got things on there about well-being, so be that mental well-being or, you know, financial well-being. We've put, you know, top tips on there. We got people to share ideas of things that they were experiencing and what that might help other people. So we've had all of that going on. But I would have to say our centre managers have done a great job. Obviously, we provided them with materials, but they've engaged, I think, much more on a one-to-one basis with people as they've returned. I mean, our centres largely, you know, were smaller groups, so not in the hundreds that Karen might have described, but, you know, we might have 30 colleagues working for MacArthur Glen in a centre. Obviously, they've come back on a rolling basis. And it's been taking the time to treat them as individuals and understand what's been different for all of them, because they've all had different experiences. You know, some people have came from a background of furlough was great. It started out as a bit of the holiday, and then they found other things to do. Then you've got the people who have returned to us where they've had a very challenging time. And not only are they now coming back to work, but they've now still got children who are at home. So, yeah, the reinduct is absolute requirement, but dealing with people on an individual basis, I think, has been really important.
Yeah, I guess everybody's got their own circumstances, haven't they? And Claire, finally, Danny, even, sorry. Your turn.
Yeah, so completely agree with what the other ladies have said. Reinducting the staff is absolute must, especially within our business. There is an awful lot of changes with infection control, you know, just the care that is provided to our residents. That, you know, elements of that has had to change, i.e. if COVID is in the home, there was lots of different bits and pieces. We're seeing kind of COVID sneak back in, and some more positive cases. So when staff have come back off of furlough, they have had to be completely kind of retrained, because they've not been there since March, and they've not been there for the new infection control measures, the new PPE measures, the new way that we go about everything basically to do with our residents. They've had to kind of really be involved in being shown how to do all of it again. An element of them not being there for so long as well is having refresher training on actually what the residents' needs are within that home. So basically bringing them back, they had on their first shift, they would meet with their manager for a couple of hours, go through brand new risk assessments, go through all of the new processes on paper, and then we've advised quite a few different buddy systems to try and get them to buddy up with somebody else on the same shift, so they can go around for their first few shifts with somebody else to try and build that confidence again. But I completely agree, it's definitely on an individual basis. I've been in touch with every single person that's been on furlough leave directly, and we've tried to deal with them on an individual basis. Obviously ours was a smaller scale, so I was able to do that. But yeah, some people were phoning me every single week, can I come back yet, can I come back yet? And for their own health and safety, it just wasn't possible. But then you do have the other side where people are not willing to come back to work. So we have had the odd few kind of challenges that we'll probably go into a bit later. But luckily for us, our staff are absolutely great. And, you know, I guess it coincides with the job that they do. They're caring, they want to get back to what they do best and care for people. So we've just had to kind of take individual perspectives into account and really try and help them with their mental well-being. Where they have been shielded, they haven't been out of their homes either, so we've had to deal with kind of the health and well-being side and the mental health side, which is more prominent for our people that have been on furlough, because they haven't actually been able to do anything but stay at home and keep safe. So yeah, different perspective for our guys, I think.
Talking on mental well-being, that kind of leads quite nicely into my next question. How do you look after the mental well-being of those you're bringing back? Because obviously things like imposter syndrome might be kicking in, that kind of thing, if they're being coming back into the workplace. Claire, is there any specific things you've been doing on mental well-being with your teams?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we've considered mental well-being, you know, whether you're on furlough or whether you have returned, you know, because there's different challenges, you know, for those populations of people. One of the things that we did as a business, which we didn't have in place before, actually we had something in the UK but not more broadly, was that we now have in place a global employee assistance provider. And we announced that both to people who were returning and people who were still on furlough. That has gone down really well. I think just having the opportunity to be able to talk to somebody who's, you know, a bit more distanced from the situation, so it's not somebody within your family or a friend or even from a workplace point of view, so that's definitely helped. And I go back to the relationship piece. You know, same as Danny, we just had recently a couple of people return who've been shielding. I think for them that's been a big challenge, exactly for those same points, because they've largely been at home and not been out and about, and then to suddenly come back into the workplace. So really giving them assurance about what has happened and what is different, and also guiding them back through. So, you know, some of our roles are different. We're all having to do slightly different things because not everybody has come back. So again, just taking the time and giving people a level of confidence. Yeah, I think that's really for us from the broadest of wellbeing point of view. We've tried to engage with colleagues.
And Karen, what about you? Anything we've been doing at Reed specifically?
Well, I sort of build on what Danny said and Claire said earlier about there being different populations. So we actually found in our furlough population that there were probably 3 different populations. One group that asked to be furloughed because of childcare responsibilities, another that have absolutely really enjoyed being furloughed, and as a result are about to make some probably career changing decisions. And then there's those that have struggled with being furloughed and can't necessarily wait to be back at work. Again, like Claire, we have an employee benefits package that also has counselling built into it, which has proved invaluable, and we serve up that every time we speak to our co-members, we serve that up to them so they are aware of that. We've also launched a wellbeing programme that's for both co-members who are active and those that are furloughed, and those that are furloughed have still got access to certain elements of our intranet so they can remain connected to the business. I do believe that the longer you are on furloughed, there is more increased potential of becoming disengaged. And I think especially when you hear of others coming back and you're not one of those ones that come back, again, I think that's when possibly imposter syndrome can come in. One of the things that we committed to all of our co-members when they became furloughed was, as a minimum, their managers would speak to them every 2 weeks and give them an update on a business, an update on trading levels. And because we're very commercially orientated, we can make those co-members understand that it's actually a commercial decision based on volumes, as opposed to not connected to them as a person and an individual. And I think having those conversations informally has actually proved really invaluable to those co-members who are still furloughed, especially, as I said, as they see those around them potentially working in the same offices as them, maybe coming back before them too. It's a really tricky one to manage, you know.
Karen, I'd absolutely support what you've just said. I mean, we've still got colleagues who are on furlough, and you know, the centre managers making sure that that regular communication is taking place. And, you know, like you said, that's about the weekly call. It's about they've given people the opportunity, obviously, as it's been safe, to come in and have face-to-face conversations. You know, look, the longer you're on furlough, I think people generally have a view, which is, am I ever going to return? And of course, we're in a very tricky situation. So it's not about saying yes or no, but it's trying to kind of, as best as possible, deal with people's concerns. It's been really challenging.
Right, thank you for that, ladies. We're getting a bit short on time. We've got probably about 10 minutes left. So what I'm thinking is we'll probably give the next question a miss and then maybe look at the emotional needs. So how are you dealing with the emotional needs of those furloughed and those that weren't furloughed? Claire, this probably isn't one so much for you because I know most of the staff at Macarthur Glen were furloughed. But how about Karen? What are Reed doing in this circumstance?
This one's a tough gig. I think we actually had a load of scenarios that collided at the same time. So while some co-members were furloughed, we also took the tough decision to temporarily reduce hours for our remaining co-members. The co-members who have remained active throughout the whole time have worked incredibly hard, and we recognise absolutely their contribution. So we've done different things for those that have remained active. So, for example, we have removed COVID performance periods so it doesn't negatively impact on performance related pay, for example's sake. And that's, really helped. And we've looked at how we can motivate and engage with those co-members who stayed within the business. We're also looking to create a hall of fame for co-members who have worked all the way through the pandemic to really recognise their contribution, whether they're frontline colleagues or whether they're more central support. As the furlough deadline came up, we did start to swap some co-members out of furlough and put others in who were struggling. Resilience, it's a tough trading environment right now, so we felt that we needed to do that. And Claire mentioned earlier about the great culture in Macarthur Glen, and this really came to the fore for us. Teams worked incredibly hard to hit targets so that they could get their teammates out of furlough. And that has just been an amazing thing to see. It's a fantastic team spirit, but it hasn't all been a bed of roses. There have been some issues. There are some views from our active co-members that those who were furloughed were having just an amazing time because the early summer weather was just brilliant. And that's, what we've then tried to do is really bring to life the experiences of those who have been furloughed to all of our co-members, because we were all on the same journey. We're all on a journey to get through this and to make sure that Reed trades well and we give the customer service that we need to give, but we're all on different boats on that journey. And it was really just trying to bring to life those different experiences that people have. We've used our co-member survey and the feedback that we've got from that to change things as we went through that journey. And sometimes, the majority of the time, actually, that feedback is not anonymised. And that's enabled us to go back to those co-members and really pick up conversations with them. So the emotional needs are in the round. It's actually for all our co-members who have worked through this period, and it's been incredibly tough, but we have seen some amazing team spirit that's come through the back of it as well.
Yeah, it has been really lovely. Speaking from a person that didn't get furloughed and was working, it's been really nice. Danny, what about you? Have you got any ideas on this?
Yeah, so I think completely agree with everything that Karen said. It's, emotional needs for multiple different groups of people have been really crucial to kind of try and understand from their perspective. So the three main groups that I'll probably put it in for ease is we had our service managers in each of the different care homes that were running that service and managing all of their staff. And then you've got the actual staff that are frontline providing care to those that have maybe tested positive for the virus and, putting their lives on the line, just like the NHS. And then you've kind of got those that were not, well, they were a frontline business. We have a management team and a head office team that were all working from home. That team of people had never ever worked from home before. We were not set up to work from home, just like probably a lot of other businesses. And actually the effects of that on people's emotional state and mental health has been a real kind of, not a surprise, because it was something that I had planned for, and the business, we'd come together and really tried to focus on it. But it was surprising actually that across the board, all of those three different groups, everybody struggled. It doesn't matter who you were. there were struggles for different reasons. And again, it was trying to understand that kind of in those different groups to try and support. And it may sound silly, but for example, our managers, we were in the height of everything going on for us with kind of care things changing on a daily basis. Every 24 hours there was new updates from the Scottish Government, from our government, from overall UK guidance about what care was to be provided, what PPE. So we had a lot of kind of operational stuff that needed to get out there into our homes and our staff on a daily basis. And just something really simple, we were sending our managers urgent updates every day, following our crisis team calls with every bit of updated information they needed. But at the bottom of that, I would always put a different positive quote, a different message, something to just remind them how crucial they are to the business, but also to make sure they're looking after themselves. So something as simple as that, and just, every day researching different kind of memos, positive things, sending out positivity across the board. We got a lot of feedback that actually just reading that after the guidance each day really made them go, right, yeah, I've read all of that. This is what the plan is today. This is what we've got to change today. And it just helped for all of the staff that were kind of frontline. Ours was more, their emotional state was really about their families, their friends, how they were able to go and do their food shopping, how they were actually going to travel to work. So there was lots of different things that we were trying to find and trying to get feedback from managers about what people's concerns were. And we decided to launch, we actually provided every single staff member food baskets with kind of staple foods for their families and children for a couple of months throughout the height of everything, which actually meant they didn't have to panic so much about getting changed out of their uniforms and going to a food store and making sure they went at the right time that they was allocated and things like that outside of their shift. So we did multiple different things to try and come at it from different angles and try and show our appreciation and support. And I think for the head office team, there's only about 20 people approximately, but that we've focused on, again, on an individual basis. We've highlighted who was struggling more, who we suspected, maybe actually working from home, how has that affected their personal lives on a bigger scale. And I've actually hosted weekly quizzes for that team and weekly kind of Zoom calls that maybe, one of the single parents on there put their child, and, I spoke to them about any schoolwork they was doing and just giving them 5-10 minutes break, just trying to get families involved in these quizzes every week. So actually trying to get our staff to understand that it's okay that you're homeschooling your children, and it's okay if you miss a call because you've got other things going on. So yeah, we've tried to come at it from a lot of different angles for kind of all the different areas. So it's been quite a crucial thing for us to focus on, really.
And Amy, just one thing I'd say, which is a really simple thing, but it's about holiday. Of course, people have plans to go abroad, and obviously that's all been taken off the table. But we had particularly some of our managers who felt guilty about taking holiday because of what was going on. And, I think it's really important that people do that. You can only run so fast for so long. And where people have taken the holiday and they've come back, the world looks different. So a really simple thing, but really, really encouraging people to take holiday and to take breaks is important.
Yeah, I think so. I found personally, in my own personal experiences, was that I was very, very, very busy for the first few months, and then I kind of fell off a cliff because I've been working so hard, and taking holiday really, really helped with that. Okay, so one a bit more for you, Claire, because you didn't get to answer so much about the last one. What longer term strategies should businesses implement to help employees who are struggling after returning to work, whether it's not managing their workload or changes to their roles and their teams? Claire, can you take that one then first for me?
Yeah, I mean, I really thought about this question. In terms of people returning, obviously, we've sort of covered that in terms of the conversations, talking to people about what's different, keeping them safe, all of that. And obviously that will continue. But I also balance this with the piece around people who are on furlough. And, we expect that we will continue to avail ourselves of the government scheme till the end of October. again, because our business hasn't returned in the way, you know, we would have hoped, for all of the reasons we would know. So I think in terms of longer term strategies, it comes back to the same thing, you know, the communication is really important, explaining to people, you know, what is happening, how the business is performing. And again, you know, Karen raised this point before, but where people have remained on furlough, being clear with them that it's not about them, it's about the work isn't there for them to do, but keeping them connected in terms of what is happening and what's progressing within the organisation. I don't see that's going to change. I think we're in the situation we are. I think we'd all love it to be better overnight. We all know that's not going to happen. So it's continuing with the same stuff that we've already started, really. I think we're in it for the long game.
Yeah. Karen, Danny, anything you guys want to add to that?
I would absolutely agree with everything that Claire said. I mean, for me, communication. If you think you've then communicated enough, do it again. That to me is the whole key thing here, whether you are on furlough, whether you're returning from furlough. If you're returning from furlough, what's expected of me? When is it expected of me? How are you going to help me do that? All of those things now are absolutely key, and moving performance conversations into an everyday conversation as opposed to a once a month one-to-one, or even worse, an annual review, moving away from that completely and just literally dealing with the moment. We all know that, I mean, if you just look at the furlough scheme, it changed literally on an hourly basis. If you then apply that to commercial and the way we trade, that still is changing. We're in extremely volatile times. So that day-to-day comms sounds ridiculous to call that a long-term strategy, but actually I think that's the way we're going to get through this.
Fab. Danny, anything?
Yeah, I totally agree with what the ladies have said. It's definitely the long haul for us, and I think we're not going to be coming out the other side of this anytime soon. But I think it's being open about that with our businesses in the different locations and communicating that. You know, because we've brought people back from furlough doesn't mean to say that we're going to have to take back steps again. And I think just really trying to get them to see the value that they're adding, and to get them to understand the value of, by following kind of all of these new processes and things, we actually will progress out of this. As soon as you kind of slip off one small relaxation rule, you can start back at the beginning again. So I think it's just that constant message of, guys, keep it up. We know it's exhausting. Just touching on what Claire said earlier as well about annual leave, that's something that we've really struggled with, to try and get people to take leave. We've kind of had two sides of that. We've had, you know, all of our staff are in their jobs for a reason. They are caring individuals and they are proud of the work that they do, and they do not want to leave our residents. They don't want them to be on their own. You know, they've been without friends and family visiting for quite some time now. And they are just, the worst thing for them is to take any time off, because they're just conscious that then they're not doing a good enough job. But that's been a really crucial thing, because people would have just burnt out if we didn't start saying to them, right, enough is enough, you know, you've got to take some time off. And the same for our service managers as well. You know, they genuinely need some downtime. You can't constantly keep going at 100 miles an hour. And I think we found that. I certainly had to take a few days off after that first kind of 2 months of that 7 days a week, 24-hour business. You know, it's tough, but I think you do have to take a step back, and everybody within that business has to take a personal approach sometimes and kind of put themselves first at some points and take some time.
Yeah, definitely. Right, we're running out of time. We've got loads of questions come through on the Q&A, so if you don't mind, I'm going to skip the last two. So much to talk about. Maybe we should have done it for a bit longer. So what I'll do is I'll read these questions off one at a time, and then I'll put them to one of you. Probably I've got 4 questions coming so far, and then we'll open the floor up. Okay, so we've got an anonymous question here from attendee. Some members of our frontline business community are seeing an increase in workload, but haven't started to unfurlough staff yet. This has led to the non-furloughed staff having huge workloads while their colleagues are not required to work. What advice can you give to managing the staff who are in at the Coalface to keep them motivated while their colleagues and often friends are enjoying furlough? I think we touched on it a little bit, but Karen, do you want to take that one?
I think firstly, also, we need to remember that the furlough scheme has moved to flexible furlough. So that means that those who are furloughed, it's no longer a black or a white situation. You're either at work or you're furloughed. So one of the things that I would urge companies to look at is, can they get the flexible furlough to work for them? Because that will enable potentially, as workload ebbs and flows, actually they can bring people in on and off of furlough. I think also what we've got to remember from a manager perspective is we've got to be realistic about what people can achieve within a normal working day. And obviously normal work has gone because the majority of people are working from home or working remotely in some way, shape or form. So I think there has to be a level of honesty between managers and their direct reports on what is actually achievable within the working time that they've got, to then understand what needs to be done elsewhere. And then that would help build a business case to potentially bring some of those people back from furlough, using the flexible furlough scheme if there isn't enough just for a whole head to come back.
Fabulous. Claire, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, and I noticed on the question it talks about people enjoying furlough. Again, I'm just going to reiterate what I said before. Everybody's different, and I'm sure there are some people who are loving the time that they're not at work. But, you know, I know definitely from colleagues within our organisation who are fearful about the future. So, you have to take a very balanced view as regards this. One of the things that we did with all colleagues as well was to try and explain why everybody wasn't returning, even though the centres were open, was because we have an interesting business model, is to really help them understand, even though people, were back in our centres, even though people are shopping and they're spending money, actually, for all of the reasons about, rental and so on, as a business, it's that old adage about, you can see the sales, but actually it's the profit where we've really been hit as a business. And obviously that has meant, our world has changed. Things that we would like to do, we would have wanted to do, things that would have been kind of more everyday have stopped for us. So it really helped colleagues to understand a bit more kind of our financial makeup as to why not everybody was coming back, even though the centres were open. And I just go back to, that's about having adult conversations with people, giving people the chance to air kind of what their concerns and views are, listening to that, but also trying to help people understand kind of what some of the model is within the business. There's that old expression, isn't it? I can't remember now, sales are vanity and profit is sanity. There's a little bit of that within our businesses we have to appreciate as well, to ensure where we can that the whole employment piece for colleagues in the future.
Brilliant. Danny, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's communication again, I think is the common theme that we're all moving back to. You just need to treat everybody like adults and be honest, and try and help them understand both sides. There's always two sides to the story, and like we've touched on, all you are going to see either over social media or through word of mouth from colleagues that are on furlough is what a good time they're having. Not everybody is putting their hand up to explain actually the uncertainty they're seeing, the financially, affected piece, and what it's meant for them and their families. Yes, a lot of people have, had time with their children, but actually they've been homeschooling, they've been, they've had things to do. So I think, again, it's just that communication piece, try and understand, and try and kind of not let that kind of resentment hit. People are adding so much value at the moment by cooperating with businesses, trying to work our way through this. This has not been plain sailing in any way, shape or form. And I think that's the key message there. I don't think any business in the whole world would have got this 1000% right. There's just no way. Everybody's been learning every single day. And I think just be honest, have those conversations. If you've got a concern, raise it with your manager. And actually, sometimes by asking a question, the management team might go, oh, actually, yeah, we've not thought about that. So don't be afraid to also just communicate back. Don't wait for your business or your managers to communicate to you. Go to them and query things and, just have a conversation.
Brilliant. Another question here, just if any of you have got any tips, shout out. If anyone has to re-induct virtually, how have you found virtual inductions, and have you got any tips on those? Have any of you done those?
Yeah, so I've actually brought in a few new employees within our head office team on a virtual basis. So we've actually recruited during this period, and to kind of yeah, induct new starters on a virtual basis has been interesting, but it's actually been fairly enjoyable, I think is the word that I'll use. And I think that's what we've tried to portray to the rest of the team. You know, it's a new circumstance for everybody, and everybody played a role and a part in trying to make those team members feel welcome. And everybody, you know, we try to get everybody involved in that. Again, it helps. We do lots of kind of team Zoom calls and video calls and things. And now we've kind of had the odd face-to-face distance meeting and things. It's like, you know, meeting for the first time, even though you've known them for the last 4 months, has been a really interesting kind of point for people to pick up on. Some key tips, I think, for me was really clear communication, and actually sometimes just working through things on a video call or being on the other end of the phone for them, and kind of reiterating that no question is a silly question. It's pretty much been the same as if they had started and we were sitting in the office. But what I had to do is take a step back and recognise that actually they wasn't in a room with somebody then, you know, asking, oh, where's this, or what's that, or what drive do I go in to find that file, or so it was actually trying to be a bit more proactive with that and kind of buddy them up with different people for different areas of questions. So if you want something to do with this drive, or you want to find a file, this is your best person for that. You know, if you want to ask, you know, something about a different team member, or just find out something about the finance team, or, you know, who's the best person to speak to, here's your buddy for that. And it was just trying to be a bit more proactive and really try and put them in touch with as many people within the team as possible. So it made them feel part of the team and not kind of an outsider.
Fab. Claire, I'm going to put a question to you here, just because I'm picking on you. What would you do if a staff member refuses to return due to anxiety and general concerns, even though you've had everything in place for health and safety and have assured them?
Yeah, I mean, we've not had that situation, but we did talk about it as and when we were looking at people returning. You know, our plan was, you know, same old thing. You're going to listen, you're going to seek to understand where that anxiety is coming from. You know, as a business, we've put some very rigorous health and safety checks into place. And, you know, ultimately you could get into a difficult situation, because my view would be, you know, you're making a reasonable request. So, but I think the bottom line is you seek to understand, and you seek them to help to understand the situation the business finds itself in. My view is we've had a number of colleagues return, and touch wood, we've not had any incidents within the MacArthur Glen community, so to speak. And that's because it's safe. So trying to help people understand that.
Fabulous, thank you for that one. There's one here that's coming from an E-King. Are you able to share plans you have in place for return to work for any of your Black colleagues who, whilst in the midst of the pandemic, may be dealing with wellbeing issues in relation to the Black Lives Matter movement? Has anyone got any ideas on that one?
I think from my perspective with that, it boils back down to the whole communication piece. So, you know, we have to understand a number of elements. So there is some views medically that people from a Black background are maybe more susceptible to coronavirus, for example's sake. So I think, again, it just boils down to having the conversations with them from an adult to adult basis, understand what their reservations are with regards to returning to work, and then seeing if you can come up with a plan that's mutually agreeable with regards to them coming back to a physical working environment.
Any of you guys got anything else to add to that one?
No, I think Karen's point is very well made, and I think, you know, look, you know, all businesses have experienced coronavirus, and then you know, Black Lives Matter, which I think for all of us has made us think differently. You know, I think that's a good thing. So I'd absolutely align with what Karen said. Again, it's the whole premise of treating people on an individual basis.
Fabulous. Danny, anything to add?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think this individual basis and understanding people's perspectives and how they're feeling is really crucial. So for the type of business that we're in, we actually had to bring out and create separate risk assessments in line with public health guidelines for kind of, you know, it was in line with the Black Lives Matter movement, but it was really to do with obviously what came out about they could be more susceptible, people from that background, with regard regards to the virus. So we've had to put more precautions in place and discuss with those team members that are actually at work. So we had to kind of really hit that on a direct basis and speak to them, but also just, you know, communicate, as we've all picked up on multiple times, I think is the key thing. You're not going to understand as a business how people feel, and you're not going to understand how people that may have been affected by the different movements that have gone on whilst we're in the middle of a pandemic. I think there's just been so much to think about. It's trying to actually put them into individual boxes, if you like, and approach them on a direct basis and an individual basis for your staff.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, the three of you. We've gone 6 minutes over, which is terrible in webinar terms, but I think it's been really useful and there's been some really good ideas there, and I hope all of those that have attended have taken something away from them. Thank you, the three of you, very much. To everybody listening, do look out for our future events. Our next one is on the 9th of September on imposter syndrome. Ask your read consultant for more details of that, or keep an eye out on our social channels. Thank you once again, ladies, and hope you all stay safe.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.